Okay, Mr. Chairman, my computer says 8:30. If you'd like to give it a couple more minutes for additional members to join us before we start, that's your prerogative.
Eric, I have 8:29, so I'll just wait 1 or 2 more
Okay.
minutes.
Okay, not a problem.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to this virtual MetroPlan Orlando TSMO meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is Alex Laffey, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. We also have a team of folks working to ensure this meeting runs smoothly. Today's meeting was advertised on MetroPlan Orlando's website and social media, as well as through targeted emails. Florida's Sunshine Law requires a quorum to be physically present in a room for a government meeting. Governor DeSantis had suspended this requirement in an executive order allowing government boards to conduct business using virtual meetings. That order expired October 31st, and so this meeting is being held in a workshop format. Staff will further explain what this means in just a moment.
Mr. Chairman?
So we'll keep microphones muted unless you've been recognized to speak. And we'll use the raise hands feature to participate in discussion. There are 2 public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public who want to speak will use the raise hands feature found in the participants tab. If attending by phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand and request to be recognized. When you're called, your microphone will be temporarily unmuted by staff and will ask you to state your name and contact information for the record. We also accepted comments by email and phone message before the meeting. The guidelines for public comment are posted at metroplanorlando.org/virtual meetings. We want this and all future online meetings to be accessible to all. Participants may join by computer, tablet, or phone. If you need accommodations to participate in the future, please contact MetroPlan Orlando. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Eric Hill of the MetroPlan Orlando staff for agenda review.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. And I trust that everyone had a safe, relaxing, and happy Thanksgiving week last weekend, probably preparing for the Christmas or the rest of the holiday season now. Thank you for working with us as we conduct these virtual meetings. We appreciate your patience and understanding. Based on the direction from our board at the September meeting, this meeting is being held as a virtual workshop in which action items that are being advanced to MetroPlan Orlando board will be reviewed and discussed, but no formal action will be taken so that a quorum will not be required. The board's action on these items will be ratified at a future in-person TSMO meeting. This format is subject to change if the governor's issues another executive order. Again, thank you for your flexibility during this time. As the chairman mentioned, we'll be using the raise hand feature to recognize committee members during the meeting and to call on members of the public during the comment time. If you have joined us on the phone only without the video screen, please use *6 to mute and unmute your line. And please use *9 to raise your virtual hand so that the meeting host can see that you wish to be recognized. You'll see that there's a chat feature on your toolbar. This communicates with all panelists in this meeting, which includes committee members, staff, and presenters. Please only use this if you are having technical issues or need assistance. A full record of the chat comments will be included with the public record of this meeting. In terms of the agenda, Mr. Chairman, in our agenda package that you received under or for the MTP presentation, there is a tab 3 indicated. That is a typo. And so there is no tab for that item in the agenda. So the general information section is the actual tab 3. So there will be no tab 4 as indicated in your agenda. That completes my announcements this morning, and there are no other changes to the agenda. So now we'll like to take the attendance, and I'll ask Ms. Lisa Smith to call the roll for the record. And again, there are no action items, so we will be able to move forward even if there isn't a quorum present.
Good morning. I'd like to ask all committee members to please go ahead and unmute yourselves now for the roll call, and you can go on mute again once your name has been called. Please make sure your video is on so that we can confirm that it's you. You'll find the unmute and video buttons on the bottom left side of your toolbar on the bottom of your screen. Please say here or present when your name is called. Craig Baird.
Present.
Red Blackadar.
Present.
Cade Broad. Kelly Brock.
Here.
Michael Cash.
Present.
Crystal Clem.
Present.
Elisa Edie.
Present.
Hazem El Hassar.
Present.
Brad Friel. Rachel Giranella.
Present.
Nasim Gandor.
Present.
Eric Gordon. Glenn Hammer. Ryan Homiani.
I'm present.
Don Dredge.
Here.
Carl Kelly.
Present.
Alex Laffey.
Here.
Kathy Lee. Travis Mathias.
Present.
Butch Margraff.
Here.
Lieutenant Brad McDaniel. Nabil Muhaisen.
Present.
Lee Pulliam.
Here.
Ryan Sanders.
Here.
Ramon Sonorens.
Present.
Shad Smith.
Present.
Sarah Walter.
Present.
Jeff Weatherford.
Present.
Charlie Wetzel.
Present.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. We will now hear public comments on what we normally call action items, but in this format, our items will be for review and or discussion. Do we have people who want to speak to any of these items? If so, please use the raise hands function found at the bottom of your screen or by pressing *9 on your phone keypad. When you are recognized, the host will unmute your microphone. You will see a button pop up that says the host wants to unmute you. Accept that prompt to activate your microphone. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record. Please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less. Are there any comments at this time?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, we do not have any any comments on the items that we are going to be reviewing this morning?
No written comments also?
None.
Okay. Let's move on then. We have 4 items for review and or discussion today. Item number 1, our first action item is approval of the minutes from our October 23rd meeting, which are at tab 1 in your agenda packets. I hope you all have had a chance to review them. Are there any corrections or revisions that need to be brought to staff's attention? Okay. Hearing none, as a reminder, these items will be brought back for formal approval at a future in-person meeting. Our next item is the FDOT amendment to the fiscal year 20/21 to 24/25 TIP, found at tab 2 in your agendas. Mr. Keith Caskey from MetroPlan Orlando will present the information. Please hold your questions on this item until the presentation is finished. Go ahead, Mr. Caskey.
Hi, good morning. The amendment we have this month includes 4 projects. There's a new pedestrian lighting project in Orange County, and then there's additional funding for a traffic signal project at US 441 and State Road 50. And then Lynx has funds rolling forward from 2020 to 2021 for their capital grant to purchase buses. And then there's a new advanced traffic operations project in downtown Orlando. And you all have the information on this in your agenda packets. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Is there any discussion or questions for Keith on this item?
Mr. Chairman, we do have a raised hand. Mr. Elazar?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I just wanted to ask a question regarding the TSMO projects, because we have a project on the PPL that has been #1 for a couple of years, and it hasn't been funded, but other projects that have not been on the PPL are being funded at this time. So I just wanted to question why.
So, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Alazar, is this question related to the amendment or to the PPL list?
Well, I'm assuming that the TIP proposed projects are coming from the PPL, but apparently that's not the case for one of the projects at least.
Are you
So-
referring to the downtown Orlando project specifically, or?
Yes.
Yeah, that project was a grant from FHWA that was awarded to the city of Orlando, I guess a couple of years ago. And so it's been advanced so that, to kind of coordinate with the completion of the I-4 Ultimate project. I think it was an accelerating innovation and deployment grant. I don't know if anyone from the city wants to provide more details on that, but that's the information that we had gotten from FDOT.
And could I just add in, Hasm, it didn't skip over any projects to get funded in the TIP because it was a grant. That's why.
Okay, so is there any update on the status of funding for the PPL projects at this time?
The DOT is still working through the work program right now. We can chat offline if you want about, I think the project you're talking about, the signal cabinets.
I would appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, moving on. Our third item.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
If we could, just for the record, go back to the roll call, because there were 2 people that sent messages indicating that they had been left off. And Lisa, if you could just call their names so that they could be added to the record.
I already marked them present. I see them.
Okay. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman, we can proceed.
Thank you. Our third item is the 2045 MTP cost feasible plan. And again, there is no tab for this item. Ms. Cynthia Lambert and Mr. Alex Trugger from MetroPlan Orlando will present the information. Please hold your questions on this action item until the presentation is finished. Go ahead, Ms. Lambert and Mr. Trugger.
Thanks, Mr. Sherman. Appreciate that. And good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody early on a Friday morning. So this is the end of our journey to adoption for the 2045 plan. You've been hearing us present many pieces of this over the past year and a half or so. And next week on Wednesday, it will be going to the MetroPlan Orlando board for adoption. And so today, we hope to update you on things, feedback that we've gotten, both from the public and from our agency partners. And we'll share with you some of the adjustments that have been made to the cost feasible plan. And then we hope to answer any questions you might have. So last month you received an in-depth overview of what's in the plan, and you've had about a month to chew on that for a little bit. So if you have any questions, we definitely want to make sure those get answered today. So next slide, please. So I wanted to share with you some feedback that we got. We had a public meeting on November 9th called 2045 Plan The Reveal. And this was where we gave the public pulled the curtain back, showed them what was in the plan. And so we had a really well attended program. For the live webinar, we had about 100 attendees, and 42% of those were return participants. So these are folks that perhaps had been to an earlier program in the process, and now they've stuck with us to see what the final product was. So we were happy to see that. And so far, the webinar recording on our YouTube channel has received more than 200 views. So this has been great on the playback. I want to share one of the questions that we asked the audience. You can see it on the bottom of this slide here through a poll. We asked, if money fell out of the sky tomorrow for this plan, how would you want to spend it? And so you see what we actually got answers across the board, indicating multimodal interest to me. But you see the top three. The top one was more bus and rail, most popular answer. The second one, smart signals and technology, followed by safety projects. So I hope you all go away from this meeting today encouraged that the public really supports the types of projects that you guys work on and that you put out there on the street. So this is good news, I think, for this group. So moving on to the next slide, please. We received a lot of great public comments on our draft 2045 plan. The comment period was open for a little bit over a month. So it was open from October 16th through November 20th. And we received 39 different comments. And I believe I did see a tab in your full agenda with all of the official record of public comments that we put together. And so that included a summary and analysis and the actual full text of all of the comments. So today I'm just going to share with you a little bit of that overview. Most of the comments that came in did come from individuals. We had a few agencies and groups, advocacy groups, that wrote in on behalf of their whole organization. So I'll touch on a few of those that came in as well. Here you see in the chart some of the more popular topics for comments. Topping the list is transit, followed by funding. General was just kind of our bucket that we put lots of different things, call it miscellaneous, if you will. I got a lot of thanks and compliments, Korean Drive, technology, bike, pet, and environment. So I'll go through on the next slide and talk a little bit more about each of those. So we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So when we took all of the text from the public comments, we put them into a word cloud generator, and this is what popped out. So what stood out to me when I first looked at this was, I thought, wow, we can really see the link between transportation and people. This is kind of like the words that came out when I looked at this. So we know that transportation has a direct impact on quality of life for people. And I think that really came through in the comments. But perhaps the base word you see there is transit. So we have a lot of interest from members of the public in improving the transit system. And so that had to do with convenience, frequency, more routes, more premium transit. So it was really a kind of wide-ranging desire to take a look at both the bus and the rail system, and to put more service out on the street. We did have an advocacy group that wrote in. They're called Central Floridians for Public Transit. And they wrote in quite a lengthy letter. If you'd like to read that, it was comment number 38. But they were urging more funding for transit. They offered up several suggestions for improvement. And a lot of the transit comments actually also touched on funding, which was our next most popular topic. So, a lot of talk about not only the desire to spend more money on transit, but also the need for a dedicated funding source to have a more sustainable source of funding for that. Other commenters were very interested in seeing a higher level of investment in bicycle and pedestrian projects as well. And some even offered a few ideas for funding models on what we might use to replace the gas tax. So we know that it's going to be a long-term challenge for the transportation industry to really nationally find a new model for how to fund transportation. So we had a lot of forward-thinking folks. We're happy to see the thanks and compliments come in. Lots of people took the time to say, hey, thanks a lot for your planning efforts. We had several folks write in about the interest in seeing the Corinne Drive project be constructed and funded. As you all know, we conducted the Complete Streets study on this. This wrapped up last year. And so several of the residents have stayed in touch with us and continue to advocate to really see this project. They'd like to see it much sooner rather than later. So we continue to work on trying to get this funded. Currently, in the current TIP, the design is in there. And so we're hoping that we can work in the next TIP to potentially get construction funded as well. Bicycle and pedestrian was another big topic of interest for folks. And a lot of those comments focused on the safety aspect of vulnerable road users. Bike Walk Central Florida wrote in a nice letter. As you all know, they are the group that runs the Best Foot Forward for Pedestrian Safety program, and we do contribute to that organization to help run that program. But they were happy with the multimodal direction that this plan is taking, but they encouraged more spending on bicycle and pedestrian projects so that we can continue to work together to improve safety. We also heard from the Florida Trail Association. They were interested in seeing the Florida National Scenic Trail reflected in our maps, and they are also advocating for a land bridge across the 528 that would connect Desert Ranch and the Halscott Preserve so that hikers can get across. Technology was another big area of comment. We had a few folks write in about different specific types of technology that they think the region should be preparing for. And we had some feedback from the city of Orlando mentioning their future ready plan that they're working on. And on the environmental side, we heard from the Florida Forest Service confirming that there's no major impact to state forests. So we're happy to hear from them and glad to have involvement from the environmental community there. So that is the overview of the public comments that we received. At this point, I will hand it over to Alex and he'll talk to you a little bit about the updates that we've made to the cost feasible plan.
Great, thanks, Cynthia. So the question you see here on this slide really is kind of the crux of my presentation today. And in short, I'm really just going to cover, what has changed, what we've modified as part of the cost feasible plan since the last time we presented this, to our advisory committees and board. So we can go to the next slide, please. So in a nutshell, these 5 topics, cover the types of changes that we've made. A lot of them were actually based on your feedback, the agency feedback we received, through those, preliminary steps of our public involvement period. But as we put the plan out and as we, say jokingly and sometimes, planning for, our planning area is the size of Delaware. So we have a lot of projects in a lot of different areas. So we try to get it right at the MPO level, but of course we lean on our local partners to ensure that things like project limits, logical termini, and those project descriptions, are consistent with what with your localized plans. We also removed overlapping or duplicate projects. In some cases, we had, projects that, had maybe a technology and a widening or complete streets and a safety project, things like that, where we actually went back and just reclassified the actual project description to be more fitting with what the actual improvement is. And just so when we're going out there, we're making one improvement on the roadway as part of our long range plan. We also, heard feedback at the last technical advisory committee as it pertains to local transportation revenues. So we coordinated again with our local partners to make sure we're reflecting those budget amounts, within our plan. So we've updated those. We also got additional projects and funding identified from Florida's Turnpike Enterprise. So those new projects, some fully, some partially funded, are now included in the updated documentation. Based on all of those changes, the feedback we received, we've updated our technical documentation, updated our cost feasible tables, and have now posted that information online into our data viewer, which I'll talk about momentarily. We can go to the next slide, please. We're actually just real quick before I cover that, I think it's also important to note we got a couple comments more recently, about a couple intersections like the Holden Gatlin intersection. That was a project that we previously had on our state roads list, but we did not include the rail relocation as part of that. So we've updated that project cost, which did have some impact to some partially funded projects in the plan period 3, kind of in that 2040 to 45 period. And also some feedback that we received from Osceola County. We've made a change to the off-system list to correct the Neptune Road project to be consistent with our prioritized project list and the trip limits that are shown on that list. No impacts to cost feasibility on that. But with all of those changes, we're looking at a almost $28 billion plan, 27.9 billion from 2026 through 2045. So this is the 20-year period outside of our transportation improvement program. As you can see on this slide, 53% of those funds, almost $15 billion in total investment in our region, if not more, as we progress into the future. But when we look on the federal, state, and local side, 47%, making up almost $13.2 billion. We can go to the next slide. I'll talk about that a little more and really going to focus in on those federal, state, and local funds. Similar slide to my presentation that we made to jointly attack in TSMO last month. But this is when you look at all of our project types, all of our funding categories. This is kind of what we have in store for the long range plan. As I've mentioned in previous presentations, federal and state funding, some categories aren't created equal. There's strings attached. There's lack of flexibility in some cases. So where we've had flexibility, we've talked about this, we're really flexing, we're following through with our board and advisory committee policies. But in some cases, we have to just kind of roll with how the funding eligibility, and that pertains really to the I-4 and for our state roads project. So that state roads category is a multimodal category. When you look at that list, it includes everything from complete streets to operational safety ITS type projects, as well as some widening projects, all of which have to be on the state road system to be eligible for that funding category. As I spoke last month as well, we have an off-system widening category. This is new for this plan, where we're taking state funds, eligible state funds, up to 10%, and we're using that to support our local governments in solving some of their congestion and capacity needs through widening projects. So that's a new list that we're funding, which would have traditionally been locally funded projects. So this is us using state funds to advance those local priorities. The TSMO, the complete streets, and the bike, ped, and trails categories, I know those are, really showing at the 1%, and that kind of goes back to some things are being kind of watered down basically by some of the major investment that we have on I-4, but kind of going back to the point that I made about funding flexibility. When we look at the urbanized area funds that our board receives because we're a metropolitan area, the TSMO category shows as 1%, but as many of you know, we actually use 21% of our urbanized area funds to fund systems management and operations projects. That's about $134 million over the life of the plan. Similarly, complete streets shows 1% on this slide, but when you look specifically about the funding allocation based on our board's policy, that's actually 32% of our federal urbanized area funds, about $203 million over the life of the plan. Bike ped, similarly, 17% is the urbanized area allocation based on our board's policy, about $108 million over the life of the plan. And the bus, rail, and transit is really combined federal, state, and local funds, but that does use our board's allocation for using 30% of our urbanized area funds, about $190 million over the life of the plan, plus local contributions, plus federal and state match, grant, and other formula funds that fund our public transit system. The local category is another one of those multimodal categories. When you look at those lists, you'll see a full range of project types from bicycle and pedestrian projects to safety, operational, and reliability improvement projects, as well as widening projects consistent with local government comprehensive plans. So we're looking again for about $13.2 billion, 13.19 to be exact billion over the life of the plan, federal, state, and local funds, which I'll talk about a little more on my next slide if we could move forward, please. And I want to talk about these funding policies. So the previous slide talked big picture money. What this is identifying some of those new programs. The previous long range plans really just had two lists. It had a capacity list on the state roads. So you would see a long list of widening projects on the state highway system, and then you would see a transit cost feasible list. Well, this time around, we wanted to do a full accounting of all of our federal and state funds, and really look into what we heard from the public participation, what we learned from scenario planning, and the insights that we gathered from the needs assessment process. We took that to heart, looked at the funds that we have available. We looked at our goals and objectives and said, how can we accomplish these objectives, these performance targets with the funds that we have? So we're following through on the technology front, on the systems management front. $1 million a year for signal retiming. That's something that you're familiar with. You help manage through this advisory committee process. We're ingraining that as part of our long range plan here. Something new though, as part of our planning process, is we're identifying $250,000 a year for autonomous, connected, electric, and shared vehicle demonstration projects. So we're going to work actually with this group and our technical advisory committee early 21 to start identifying candidate projects and prioritizing those consistent with the plan. So we're setting aside $5 million within the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, but we'll be identifying specific projects early next year, and we'll just modify the plan accordingly. A couple of other new categories: school mobility. This is something that we have in our priority list in our transportation improvement program, but we wanted to make sure that we had kind of a connection to our longer range plan. So our school mobility, again, $1 million a year for 20 years, 20 million over the life of the plan. That's going to supplement FDOT's Safe Routes to School program, providing those safe sidewalk accessibility connections to public schools and with a focus on elementary schools. We also have our critical sidewalk gaps program, another one of those $1 million a year for 20 years. So we're going to be working with the technical advisory committee early next year again. We've identified some critical gaps, but we need to talk more about bundling, packaging those gaps so we can actually let them out through the LAP process. But again, boxing those funds, setting them aside, and we're going to be coming back to our technical advisors, this and our technical advisory committee early next year to really start framing out those programs. But here we're setting the funds aside to make sure that we can do that. We're going to continue our support to local governments, $1 million a year for 20 years for special studies. We've had some really good experiences supporting our local partners, especially the smaller municipalities, in advancing some of their transportation needs and challenges. So we're going to follow through with that $1 million a year through the life of the plan. Also, I mentioned on the previous slide that supporting our local partners with $298 million for local road widening projects. that's new to the plan, and that will be identified in the plan, but also implemented through the LAP process. And again, the final category worth noting is our bus and rail. Our board does have a policy that sets up to 30% of our district dedicated revenue. Those are state funds that traditionally get spent on the state highway system. Our board has a policy that up to 30% of those funds can be spent on premium transit based on our needs, based on the implementation for some of those premium transit projects. That those funds come available in 2036 through 45, but they amount to about $90 million to support local government and state match for advancing and operating those premium transit projects. Go to the next slide, which is really another way we're trying to get the information out there, sharing it with you, sharing it with with the public. You may have checked out our data viewer website, looking at some of the other transportation spatial information that we have, but we have uploaded our needs and the subset of those needs that are affordable, our cost feasible projects, to this list. So there are corresponding layers for every one of our cost feasible tables actually has a visualized list. So you can click that and see what's happening in your jurisdiction, your neighborhood, the areas that are important to you. So you can check that out. It's found at the link at the bottom of the slide there. But if you go to MetroPlanOrlando.com, click the Maps and Tools tab, you'll see about 3 or 4 tools that we've actually developed. 3 of them were actually part of this long-range planning process. Data visualization using electronically accessible formats was really important to us, and knowing that people consume information via their smartphone and computer more than anything kind of really pushed us to really focus, to really engage people, through interactive maps. So that's what we have, on the interactive map front. We can go to the next slide, which is really where I want to open this up for discussion. Previously these presentations that we've made have been joint presentations, as part of the TAC agenda, but we've hoped, you as TSMO advisory members have been able to listen along over the past year and a half. But this is normally in the part of the presentation that I would ask for your recommendation for approval. But as the chair and Eric had mentioned earlier on in the agenda, because this is a workshop style, we're just really going to be trying to gain consensus here, get some feedback that your chair can articulate to the board when they give those committee updates to our board before our board takes action on December 9th. So at this time, I can answer any questions that you may have, but more than anything, we're trying to get a sense, a feel for your thoughts, opinions, and really kind of final feedback on the plan, unfunded needs, what we can afford, as well as our overarching congestion management process, which focuses on kind of short-term improving reliability, safety, and efficiency through those systems management operations solutions. So with that being said, I'll turn things back over to the chair. And like I said, I can field any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia and Alex. So is there any discussion, feedback, or questions for Cynthia and Alex?
Mr. Chairman, Hazem has a question.
Good morning, Alex. Thank you again, and great job on this plan to you and your team. I sent you an email about a month ago about some projects that were missing from the cost feasible plan, and they are on the PPL. I don't think the revised cost feasible plan has made those corrections to include those projects.
So we've included 2 of them. We included 2 of those projects, the bike ped ITS on I-Drive, Oak Ridge to Central Florida Parkway, that was added back in for the study and the construction phase, and the adaptive on John Young Parkway. The other 2 projects, we actually, and I think Nick might be able to help with this, we're actually believe those projects are committed in the work program. We actually want to fund them in the TIP in this next year of the TIP. So that's actually why they're not included in that later plan period, as we're actually going to attempt to fund them here near term. But Nick, can you provide Hazem a little more background if you could?
That's correct, Hazem, and that's what I was going to give you a call about. Signal cabinets and the Pine Hills bike ped ITS were both submitted for programming, but they're in the the draft for the tentative, so we don't know yet. But since we submitted them, if they do not get programmed, then we'll have to do a modification to put them back in the plan.
Okay, I appreciate it. I just want to make sure no projects are missed. So, because we're not going to have a chance to include them later.
No, we know the signal cabinets have been on the list for a while, as we've been trying to get that programmed over the last couple of years. So appreciate your patience.
Thank you.
I think, Hazem's question actually raises, something else that I neglected to say. As part of those special funding programs, when we look at our national highway system, that state road system, it's almost $2.5 billion over the life of the plan, but we're actually setting aside $2 million a year annually. So that's $40 million over the life of the plan. That's going to be focused for TSMO on the state highway system. So that's another one of those programs that we're going to work with this body and FDOT to kind of frame out those programs. So we're setting those funds aside, but then we're going to come back to you when we have more time to really identify some of those area-wide, county-wide, corridor-wide projects, and we'll fund those accordingly. But that's another $40 million of TSMO investment that's going to be dedicated to the state highway system.
And I appreciate that, but I do see that you included several specific corridors for the TSMO projects, and none of them were projects from the PPL. So just wanted to make sure that all projects are not forgotten.
Mr. Chairman, we also have a question from Mr. Kelly Brock.
This is more of a comment, but I was excited to be part of the MTP working group associated with this. I was honored to be part of that. And I wanted to thank Alex and Cynthia for their presentations today. I think they did a great job giving some context to some of the public comments that were received. I think that this plan certainly is going in a positive direction compared to previous plans. I think this is really taking good steps to where we need to go. That said, if you have not read the public comments, I would highly encourage you to do so. I was excited to see that they seem to be well informed, and many of them are on the right track, in my opinion, concerning we got to get away from road widening. We have to focus more on transit, complete streets, bicycle and pedestrian. And when you look at the plan overall, it is still a road heavy plan. And as Alex alluded to, a lot of that is beyond MetroPlan's control. It really takes federal, state, and local paradigm shifts in how funding is spent. But I just want to encourage you to take a look at those public comments. It gives some good context.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. Was there anybody else?
I don't see any other hands raised, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, our fourth item is the appointment of a workforce development task force. Mr. Eric Hill from MetroPlan Orlando will present the information. Please hold your questions on this action item until the presentation is finished. Go ahead, Mr. Hill.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, this is a follow-up to discussion that I led at our last meeting in October on workforce development, and it builds on a couple things. Excuse me. The department had already kind of launched this kind of an effort a few years ago, and we want to build on that with working with the technical schools and high schools to help develop that next cadre of transportation staffers, technicians, planners, engineers, on and on. So we want to create a mechanism, and so that would be the focus of the task force. It's also something that builds on one of our board priority areas or emphasis areas, and that is to get more youth involved in transportation. I always like to tell the story of how I kind of fell into transportation by mistake. And it was a mistake that I ended up in this industry, had no sense of, transportation. Like most folks, I thought the road was always there. I had no idea how I got there, but it was always there. So in just informing potential workforce in the future, we want to, again, create a mechanism that will allow us to do that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request some volunteers to work with myself and some other staff to create that mechanism and to pursue it, bring it to life. And so that's my request this morning. And so with that, I'll stop and see if I have any volunteers.
Okay. Do we have any volunteers for Mr. Hill on that item for the Workforce Development Task Force?
I got, Mr. Chairman, I got Mr. Homayani, Mr. Blackadar. That's two. And Mr. Wayne, excuse me, Butch McGrath. And that's three. So that's certainly enough folks to.
Eric, my
and-
hand is raised too.
Okay, I see it. That's my apology. So that's four folks. Good representation of our planning area. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will again go ahead and start working with these individuals, and we'll bring something back to the committee to review and to chew on at a future meeting. So thank you, and that's all I need right now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. If there's no questions or discussion on that item, that concludes our review and discussion items. We also have no presentations on today's agenda and no common presentations with the TAC meeting. Other business, there are several items under general information on tab 3 in your agenda packets. And Mr. Hill wanted me to call special attention to the new TSMO bylaws.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, the TSMO committee bylaws. Mr. Hill, was there anything specific you want to point out on that?
Nothing in particular other than they are new, and as members, just, if you don't mind, just go ahead and peruse those and be aware of how we operate. That's it.
Okay. Are there any raised hands, comments or questions?
I don't see any, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Upcoming meetings, the next MetroPlan Orlando board meeting will be December 9th and will be a hybrid meeting with some board members, staff, and members of the public attending in person, and other board members, staff, and members of the public and presenters attending virtually on Zoom. Our next TSMO meeting will be on January 22nd, 2021. This will be a virtual workshop, so that quorum will not be required. If this changes, however, we will be notified by MetroPlan Orlando staff. Are there any committee members who have final comments? Please use the raise hand function and unmute yourself when you are recognized.
Don't have any, Mr. Chair. Oh, hold on. Ms. Rakenya Henson from the department.
Go ahead, Ms. Hinton.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board committee members. I just wanted to make a couple of brief announcements on behalf of the Department of Transportation. First being that the department has received their allocations and we're working through the work program development cycle. We're also working with MetroPlan staff to ensure that those items on the priority list are at the front and foremost dedications for the allocations that we've received. Also wanted to reiterate that the work program public hearing has been rescheduled for January 11th through the 15th with an in-person meeting at the district office in DeLand on the evening of January 14th. As more details are developed, we'll be sure to share those with the committees and the board. And we're currently making changes to our construction report that you receive in your packets of information. We're making an effort to make them a little bit more straightforward and easier to read, kind of like at a glance almost. So we're looking for feedback when you see those changes happen to the construction report. If you have comments, please feel free to send them our way. You should see them in the next round of reports that you receive. So if you have any questions about the report or you're have any comments that you would like to share, we'd be happy to hear those. I just wanted to take time to send those brief announcements your way. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other committee members with final comments?
Don't see any, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, moving on to public comments. If any members of the public wish to comment, please use the raise hands function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll unmute your mic. After you are recognized, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comment to 2 minutes or less. Are there any public comments at this time?
Don't see any, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any written or phone comments that were submitted before the meeting?
We did not receive any, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, at this time, if there is no further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Enjoy your day, everyone.